Hello there. Welcome to Autology, the podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. Today's episode is called The Rise of India's Automotive Component Industry, and we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Vinnie Mehta, the Director General at the Automotive Component Manufacturers Association of India. Thank you for taking out time today, sir.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for having me.
ACMA is the apex body that represents India's automotive component manufacturers, big and small, that together are valued at more than $74 billion. Dollars. It has more than 1,000 component suppliers across the industry affiliated to it. But before we move forward, let me express my gratitude to Vinny for taking out time from his busy schedule for us. I have to mention this for our global audience that I have known him for more than 12 years. He's extremely resourceful, a true people's man who's always bringing multiple stakeholders together on decision making, running key initiatives, scaling up engagement on a global level, among several other areas. And this includes working closely with the government representatives and policymakers, which also means that mostly he knows what's coming up for the industry.
Thank you, Amit. You're being kind, more than kind, in fact.
You're welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you. For our global audience, let's talk numbers on India's large automotive component industry that is not just growing year on year, but also driving innovation that are suitable for the subcontinent as well as global markets. Please tell us about the turnover of the component industry for financial year 24 and the CAGR at which we've been growing
Yeah.
year on year.
So, Amit, the entire automotive industry is a pillar of strength for the Indian economy. The whole auto industry, the vehicle industry, and the component industry together account for almost little more than 6% of India's GDP. And of that, as you said, the auto component industry accounted for $74 billion in turnover in the year ending March 2024. Um, we provide a very significant employment. Almost more than 5 million people are engaged directly in our industry. It's a hugely competitive industry, I would like to believe, because a very significant portion of our turnover, almost 26% of our turnover, goes into export. So last year, we exported $21 billion worth of auto components, largely to the OEMs and tier ones. Almost 80% goes out to the OEMs and tier ones. And then again, the key markets being US and Europe, each of these markets account for a little over 30% of our exports. So I'm very proud to be part of this industry and the way we are contributing to the economic growth and also in terms of localizing the industry. Yeah.
I noticed that the Indian automotive component industry is fetching a trade surplus. And I say this because we've been tracking the industry for quite long, but this is a new phenomena. This is a significant achievement that also underlines the growing industry's contribution to the overall growth of India. Please tell us more about the key component categories that are driving exports for India.
So, Amit, as you rightly said, the industry has trade surplus, and notwithstanding that, we firmly believe that the auto component industry in India is very well integrated into the global supply chain. So, export and import will go hand in hand, and it makes us really very, very happy that we had a modicum of surplus in the last fiscal of around 300 million dollars. And what's also very appreciable that in the first 6 months of the current fiscal, that is FY25, we continue to maintain a trade surplus of around 150 million. And also, as I said, we are very well integrated into the global supply chain. So the profile of export and profile of import is very similar. Okay, so But there are nuances within then. But our if I were to say 60,000 feet above the ground, looking at what is our competence lies in machine castings. Okay, that's a very big sort of area that is there. But within that, if you look at what segments that are defining our exports, you have engine parts and drive transmissions, and that would be very significant proportion, almost I think 40% plus is these two together. And then there is body and chassis, there is electrical and electronic components, and so on and so forth. So almost everything that goes out to make a vehicle, we are competitive in manufacturing and we are exporting that. And what the how we are differentiating with imports is like export is largely from a commercial vehicle components, and imports is largely in the passenger vehicle segment, and that's how the 60,000 feet above the ground differentiation is. But of course, there is export for passenger car components as well, two-wheeler components as well, depending upon the geographies that we are talking about. So, as I said, US and Europe would be our key markets, but that apart, there are the Africa market and the MENA market, the Middle East and North Africa and the South African market, and including the Latin market. These are very, very rapidly growing market, but very small in quantum. Yeah.
Well said, sir. So if I'm not mistaken, I think India is the largest commercial vehicle market in the world. So we're playing on our strengths when we say that we are exporting more of the components and technologies in that category.
So when you look at the vehicle industry, we are among top five in several areas,
Right.
not necessarily in the value terms, but in number terms. So we are the third largest market when it comes to passenger vehicles. We are probably the largest market when it comes to the two-wheeler industry. We're the largest market when it comes to the tractors, the farm tractor equipment, farm tractor industry. And if I'm not mistaken, in the commercial vehicle, we probably be the sixth, but uh, within top 10 in every single category that we do, and within top five in quite a few. Yeah.
Great. Do we have a forecast on the turnover that we expect the component industry to reach in the next financial year, that is 2025 and beyond?
Well, last year we grew at around close to 10%. And in the first half of this fiscal, we're growing at about again 10 to 11%. And I think this growth rate will be maintained in FY25. Um, it's very difficult to talk about, say, the immediate future, although I believe it is bright. But of late, we've seen some degree of softening in sales of commercial vehicles and passenger vehicles, and a very significant portion of our sales are to the domestic market. Say in the first half of this fiscal, where our turnover stood at around 39 billion US dollars, 33 billion of that came from sales to the OEMs. So we are very significantly dependent on our supplies to the domestic OEMs, and there is a wee bit of softening in commercial vehicle sales and in the passenger vehicle sales, although we expect the commercial vehicle sales to pick up in the second half of this year, which is ongoing period, because in the first half there was very little government spending owing to the elections, and you know, for passenger vehicles, we have the year end approaching, and then we have the Auto Expo coming up. And the Auto Expo, you're expecting several newer vehicle launches. So that would probably bring in a lot of enthusiasm in purchase of passenger vehicles. Two-wheelers, thankfully, have come back post the pandemic, and they're growing at around 10-11%. That's a very good growth in the two-wheeler industry. Tractor growth continues to be stable. In this milieu, I think we will continue to do reasonably well. And typically, when you look at a long term or even a mid to long term range for growth and potential. India holds a great potential therein, and I don't see the automotive sales going down. I mean, typically what is being said is that by 2030, the passenger vehicle sales are going to be doubling from current around 4.5, 5 million to around 9 to 10 million. We're talking about very big numbers out there, and passenger vehicles account for almost close to 44 to 45% of production of the auto component industry. I think the long-term trajectory holds good. The GDP numbers are holding. There is a little bit of a blip in the first half, again, because the government went into an election, and I think government spending is back. There is no let go in government spend as long in terms of the infrastructure development, because that's key to growth in the automotive industry as well. So yeah, we're looking for. We believe that the future is going to be bright, so there is no concern per se. And again, you've been tracking the industry for so long. The industry is cyclical. Every segment within the industry has its own cycle. So we have to encounter crests and troughs. But when you look at the long term, mid to long term, the story remains intact.
Great. You said 10% growth. Now, in global context, 10% growth is actually a very good number. And I say this particularly when more mature and developed markets are seeing the slowdown in the sales of passenger cars, including battery electric vehicles, which is also in a way forcing the car makers and their respective supply chain to rework their cost sheets and focus on moving from battery electric to more hybrid propulsion systems. Uh, but having said that, when we look at the EV transition, there are a lot of new innovative technologies, and the more EVs India gets to produce over the next few years, would you see that this can impact the trade surplus that we've achieved in the component industry, particularly if the imports of those technologies, for example, batteries and other components, grow in the future? What do you have to say about that?
So, Amit, looking at the EV industry, I would say that the numbers are still very, very small. The EV story in India is much unlike any part of the world. It's really radically different in some sense. It's very two-wheelers driven. Okay, and when you look at the numbers, I think the two-wheeler numbers are pretty decent or impressive. You can say that. So last year we did almost close to 1 million units of two-wheelers. This year, in the first 7 months, if I'm correct, we've done around 650,000 two-wheelers already. And then there is the three-wheelers, and that's again a big number. If I recall correctly, it's around 400,000 units or more than that. Um, so when you look at the passenger vehicles, the numbers are still very, very small. It's just about 100,000 units. Okay. And in the first 7 months, we've done around 52,000 units of passenger vehicles. So unlike rest of the world, where the story is very driven by passenger vehicles, the India story is very driven by the two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And they say, and if I look at the passenger vehicle numbers, you see the penetration is just about, say, 2%, a little more than 2%. And they say that the inflection point is when your penetration level is 5%. So in the passenger vehicle space, we are clearly a little behind, and as and when the penetration improves. And what's also very important is that, maybe till about last year, there were two or three players. And come this year, Mahindra has come back with a lot of new vigor. The Auto Expo is expected to bring in several new EVs, okay, including from some of the very big traditional players like Maruti Suzuki, and Maruti is typically, plays in volumes, it plays at a value proposition, not that others don't. But what I'm saying is that suddenly the passenger vehicle space will become very, very vibrant. And also at the same time, you're seeing a very significant uptick in the infrastructure for charging. Okay. Um, so I believe it's just a matter of time that you would have a very vibrant consumption base for EVs. That will in turn propel the auto component industry to make more investments in the EV ecosystem. When I say EV ecosystem, it just does not mean supply to the vehicle. It also is an opportunity in creating the charging infrastructure. Okay. So I think that should motivate the component industry to invest more. What's very, very good is that anybody and everybody, especially the tier ones in the auto component space, are ready to be part of the EV ecosystem. Investments are being made. Okay. Also, there are government initiatives. We had the FAME 2 scheme. We have, which is now in some sense transformed into the PM e-drive scheme. It's FAME 2 plus plus
Mhm.
plus, if I may say so. And then we have the PLI scheme of the government, which is also pushing for advanced technologies, including EVs and hydrogen. So it's just a matter of time, that you would have an EV ecosystem in place, and that would also add to the opportunity of the auto component manufacturers, and we will then, in some sense, localize, okay, more of the technologies that are being imported right now. We have the battery PLI ACC. There are several companies, three of them that are sort of taking benefit of the battery PLI ACC battery scheme, and then there are others out of the ecosystem. So who are investing in battery manufacturing. So you would find quite a bit of localization happening there. Already, a lot of the battery packs are localized, but not at the cell chemistry level. That will happen in some time. Yeah, so it's always a matter of the volumes that the domestic market creates and the opportunity it creates for the component manufacturers. Yeah, and I think we have a brilliant track record when it comes to the ICE industry, and we'll continue to harness the opportunities that come our way. Yeah,
So I think you're spot on when you say that when more manufacturers, and especially the largest car
right.
maker of India, gets into the EV space, then we will
It's a game
automatically see
changer.
more
Yeah.
investments, and yeah, it will be a game changer for the supply chain as well. One of the key questions is the R&D
Yes.
investments in India,
Yes.
and especially by the supply chain, the
Yes.
component manufacturers and suppliers. I have been talking to you on this topic for
Yes.
many years, as much as I can remember.
Yes.
So from using blueprints from the OEMs to investing in own R&D operations, the auto parts industry has come far in the last 10 to
Yes.
15 years. How do you see the R&D investments growing year on year, and what are the current gaps and how can they be
Yes.
addressed? Please give us a
Yeah.
perspective on
So,
this.
Amit, I mean, there is, as you said, a significant improvement, but we cannot rest on our laurels. I would say we are well begun. Okay, the journey is going to be arduous. The journey is long drawn. It's not like you arrived. You'd be foolish if you were to think that. And you're going to step back and see what is the genesis of the industry. And, you know, typically we've grown on joint ventures. Okay. Every single large company worth its salt is a joint venture here. Okay. Or they have acquired technologies, bought it, there have been licensing or some strategic partnership with a player who's given technology. Okay, we have evolved in that manner. Okay, and as a result of which, our quotient of in-house innovation R&D has been relatively poor. Okay, that's an honest answer. Okay, but things are changing very, very fast because the industry realizes that competition today is fought not on mere cost factors. You got to control technology. You have to have a stake in the technology, right? And we are finding a very significant transformation in the industry. Some of the players today are positioning themselves as technology players. Okay, so Within the tier ones, I would say there are companies who are heavily focused. It's again a journey, I would say. There are people who have transformed, there are people who are transforming, and again, there are laggards. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there is enough and more realization in the industry to stay competitive. You have to invest in technology, you have to invest in R&D, you have to be innovative. And when we say innovation, it is just not limited to the product. You're also talking about processes, okay? And ACMA has supporting well the industry in this direction. We have made interventions at several of the shop floors. We've helped 1,400 plants become world class when it comes to their manufacturing processes and practices. And that apart, we have our own center of excellence that helps people in terms of Industry 4.0. That helps. We have a design lab that helps people in product designing. So these are interesting times for the industry. I think we understand the need to transform, and I guess that is what is driving today's auto component industry in India. But then, as I said, the journey is going to be long and arduous, and we have to be prepared for that.
I derive one question out of your input, what you just said, Vinny, and that is that what we're noticing is that on a global scale, as more and more car makers are transitioning to making electric vehicles or basically integrating electric vehicles in their own mainstream production lines. There is also a lot of vertical integration that we are seeing. So, vertical integration when it comes to owning specific technologies on the battery or on the electric motor, the propulsion systems, which means that the manufacturers have to drive the R&D many a times, that they are the ones who are driving the innovation, they are the ones who are driving the initial R&D activities, and then they are also jointly working with these suppliers out there, the trusted suppliers who can put in their expertise to see how they can mass produce the technology they've just developed. So, do we see similar activities happening in India, especially on the electric mobility front?
Well, again, I would say it is nascent, or it's we are in early stages, okay, and all this evolves, and as you rightly said, that when there is a new technology, companies can try to or do hold it very close to themselves. And when it becomes a mass and when it assumes sort of volumes of what is maybe a consumer product, okay, then you are so much more open to outsourcing it. Okay, outsourcing components, technologies, and products. And I mean, I come from the IT hardware industry, and that's how was the evolution of the computer industry, the notebooks and stuff like that. And initially you held everything to yourself. The microprocessor was your own, the operating system was your own, the hard disk was your own, and then over a period of time, you hybrid out to your suppliers or trusted suppliers, as you may like to say. But it's really the competitive suppliers, as I would like to believe, who have the technology and who could produce the volumes and scales and the quality. And I think that's what's going to happen in the EV space, because an EV is nothing but a computer on wheels.
Yes, yes. Now going forward, that is what is being increasingly said about
Yeah,
EVs.
yeah,
Please tell us about this ACMA Mobility Foundation. I think
yeah,
this was announced very
yeah.
recently, and what are the activities that you're looking to conduct within this initiative?
So I think the first and foremost we wanted to communicate to the external world is to understand and appreciate that we are an industry in transformation. Okay, it's not that, I mean, we're not resting on our laurels. I don't mean any sort of prejudice or any heavy-handedness in that, because the auto component industry has done well for itself, and the numbers speak for it. Not just ACMA's collective numbers, but if you look at individual companies and their results, they are very strong and stable. So the industry has done well for itself. But having said that, to go forward, you need to be transforming yourself. Okay, and we want to communicate to the world that look, the transformation, we are an industry in transformation. We are transforming from a brick and mortar industry to a technology industry. Okay, and uh, we wanted to be technology agnostic. Okay, you look at the number of powertrains. Um, so you asked me a lot of questions with probably a mindset that we are only ICE suppliers, right? And how are you going to do the EVs? But then there are so many kinds of nine kind of powertrains are probably coexisting in India at this juncture. Okay, um, so one, we wanted to communicate that we are suppliers of mobility component and not just from an ICE perspective. Okay, and we do not know tomorrow's mobility. What form will it be? Would it be an auto mobility? Will that be cars and trucks and buses? Would it be public transportation? Would it be robots? Would it be any other animal? Okay, but we want to prepare our industry to be capable of supplying to any form of mobility. Okay, so therefore, as we go forward, we would like to be known as mobility component suppliers and not just auto component manufacturers in that sense. Also, mobility is not just about manufacturer. There are many, many ecosystem players that will come in. You talked about R&D, right? There is R&D, there are academia, there is startups, and the software industry, right? So when the manufacturers has a very strong connotation of brick and mortar and of manufacturing machinery, and therefore some of the strategic people that we would like to partner. This is an age of co-creation, right? Somewhere we thought that the manufacturing creates a little bit of a challenge in the mindset for people coming and joining hands with us. So we thought, position ourselves as suppliers of mobility so that it helps people to come together with us to sort of service the mobility industry. And in terms of uh, our activities, firstly, all ACMA members are by default members of Mobility Foundation. And we are continuously adding more members from the larger automotive ecosystem or the mobility ecosystem, as you would like to call it. Yeah, and yes, we just about begin. And I think first and foremost, what was traditionally the Auto Expo now is called Bharat Mobility Global Expo. Within that, Auto Expo is subsumed, and that will be our first delivery from the ACMA Mobility Foundation. So it augurs well that you have the bigger Bharat Mobility Global Expo that is bringing in not just the auto industry, it is a conglomeration of nine trade fairs from so many other industries, including the steel, the software industry, the heavy equipment manufacturers industry, the startups, and everybody, right? And lo and behold, we are the mobility enablers. So I guess you would see more such activities coming in from ACMA, largely focusing on what is required to handhold an industry and transformation. So we will see more and more of our engagements with the electronics industry on the sustainability front. Um, yeah, so that's where we are. Yeah, so we're looking at creating a resilient ecosystem and that goes beyond just the automotive and focusing on sustainability. That's where ACMA Mobility Foundation comes in.
I really like the theme that you just mentioned about. And I have to talk about the localization efforts around the batteries,
Right.
if I may, and also the EV charging equipment, because one of the key things these equipment focus on is
Yeah.
electronics. Electronics is one area where we are still developing our
Absolutely.
capabilities. We are not
Not there. We're not there. Yeah.
experts.
Yeah.
Yes, we're not
Yeah.
there yet. So, how do you see the localization of the key
Yeah.
subcomponents when it comes to
Yeah.
batteries and
So it's
charging
not going to be
equipment?
easy. Okay. First and foremost, the volumes are not yet there. Okay. And if anybody is going to be investing, one has to look at the domestic market and the exports together. Okay. And again, exports is not going to be easy because there's a very big China sitting out there. Okay. Let's sort of accept it and internalize this that it's not going to be easy, even in the domestic market, because say a manufacturer, howsoever patriotic he or she may be, there always this pressure of being cost competitive. Okay, and you may end up importing from the likes of China or a Vietnam or a Korea or a Taiwan, right? Um, so, given the reality of what we have, uh, I think the government is taking measures. One must appreciate that. I alluded to the PLI scheme on ACC batteries. Okay, there are uh, when you look at another big deficit area is power electronics and semiconductors and MITI, which is the Ministry of Electronics and IT, they have come up with a semicon plan that's a $10 billion outlay. I understand that at least six to seven companies are going to be investing in semiconductor manufacturing or semiconductor packaging. These are the two kinds of companies that have come forward. So only time will tell how successful or unsuccessful we've been, but the efforts have started. Okay, one has to recognize the very big competition that is ahead of you. But I think in most traditional industries, we are hugely cost competitive. Okay, and I would like to believe that in areas of electronics, in areas of battery manufacturing, we can also be cost competitive. Okay, and alluding to say the mobile manufacturing, we're already doing very very well in that space. Although the localization again in mobile manufacturing is not very huge, but it's getting there. In that sense, we need to sort of see, time will tell whether we've sort of done well or not done well. But again, it's very nascent at this stage, and I would say that a lot of the efforts are being made by the government and the industry to sort of have a share of market, domestic and international. Yeah.
An associated question with this again, I'd like to ask. You said that typically China is a very intense competitor,
Uh-huh.
and not just for India, but for all
Oh
over the
yeah,
world. I
you
think with
see
the
what's
kind of
happening in Europe and US,
right,
and there've been so many factories announcements by some of the largest players, just Volkswagen. Of
right,
course, there's a labor issue
yeah,
there, but again,
yes,
I would say Europe probably has not been able to manage the EV transition as well. And some of the larger companies, such as Stellantis, which has
true,
footprint in Europe and the US, they didn't
true.
foresee sudden change in demand for the EVs, and their pricing strategies went wrong. But nevertheless, it is impacting the traditional industry or traditional players who are also now into EVs. And within EVs, you've seen suddenly preference shifting to hybrids. So
True.
consumer is also sometimes not so predictable. You can go wrong there. Yeah, these are
Right.
interesting times. Yeah, I'm sorry I interjected your question.
No, but I was actually just asking that it makes complete business sense if a business is looking at bringing the cost down, and with the kind of cost aspect that China has to offer, no other country is there yet, and all thanks to the subsidies and government support that we know of that the companies like CATL and BYD in China get. But that makes me ask that what stops the governments of the other regions, whether it is India or Europe, and to you the question is more in the context of India that what stops the governments here to basically provide that kind of incentives to our companies the companies with manufacturing base in India so that they can also somewhere work towards matching the cost that China competes with globally. So basically, your policy perspective in that regard.
So, if you were to draw a leaf about how sort of China went about it, and they started at it probably 25 years before, okay, and once decided, it's been a well orchestrated symphony. And when you say that, they sort of planned it so well, every single element in the value chain has been planned for, right from the stages of raw materials to making of subcomponents to components to assembly into a vehicle, and then the entire logistics part of it. Right? I mean, logistics is a huge part. And when you look at the whole thing, in comparison, as a democratic nation, sometimes it may be very difficult. So there are lessons to be learned, of course, but some of it may not be possible and practical for us. Uh, and some of what they have done may be fair or unfair. And that's the way you look at it. From an outside perspective, some of it could be unfair, but they did what is right for their country. So I think I have a huge respect in some sense of what they have achieved today. One cannot deny that. And it's also somewhat difficult to replicate because what they did was they identified a niche and they went after it and they made it very big, right? But again, having said that, we as a nation, if we were to go forward, we have to look at a complete end-to-end game plan. We also need to identify technology that they identified EV if there is another one, and then put all our bets behind it and go forward on it. I do not know if something water-based, we have plenty. Can hydrogen be that? Uh, you know, or if something else, I do not know. I'm not a technological expert. I'm a humble representative of the industry, but that game needs to be played in a very, very orchestrated manner. No element in that game plan should slip if we really want to be a world leader in that space. Or we take a call and say, look, our prowess is software and everything is getting into software defined vehicles. Then why can't India be the center of the world for software defined vehicles? Okay. We could be the back center or whatever you want to call, the back office for the entire designing of software defined vehicles,
The captive
the
centers we
captive center.
have.
Because a lot of GCs are anyways happening.
Yes.
I read somewhere that there are around 1,800 GCCs in India. Of that, 80 are dedicated to the automotive industry. Of that, more than 60% are in the auto component space. So there is a lot of technical work, engineering work that's happening out of India and sort of harnessing India's soft power. So that is another route to look at. Maybe uh, I do not know if you think you've lost out onto China on your manufacturing capabilities, but you can still build a lot on your soft capabilities. But again, you cannot lose out of manufacturing because you're a big, big nation. We need jobs, and manufacturing sector is the one that can provide employment. So we have to, like it or not, push for manufacturing, and of course, look at how we can be globally competitive within the constraints that we have.
Circling back to what you said in the beginning, that automotive industry accounts to almost 49-50% of India's manufacturing
Yeah,
GDP. So from that point of view, scaling up the manufacturing activities in India, especially on the
yeah.
automotive side, is
Yes,
key
of course. I
to
mean, we
increasing
are
the
a
share.
very key driver industry, and you know, as a developing nation, we would need more jobs. We have a very, very young population, so it's going to be a big challenge for everybody, for the government
Right.
also, and therefore, they have to keep the manufacturing sector going. Yeah,
Right. Right. Give me your understanding on the government, since you work very closely with the different ministries, bringing a lot of people from the ministries to a number of events that ACMA organizes, and at the same time, You also conduct so many meetings where industry representatives meet the ministries. So, how do you see the government at the center that we have? How keen are they in terms of drafting aggressive policies? We already have a few policies. You've spoken about some of them. Do you think there's enough government support for SMEs and the component suppliers out there?
So I would say that the auto component industry has been quite a favorite industry in getting support of the government. An industry that accounts for almost close to 50% of the manufacturing industry cannot be where it is without the government support. And it is also a fact that we are a very large country, that uh, there are very many industries. When you look at the automotive industry itself, we have a very long value chain. I mean, I don't even have a number of people manufacturing in this industry, people in the sense, number of companies that are engaged in manufacturing in this sector may well be 10,000, may well be 20,000, because there are several tiny enterprises which could be just operating out of a single room in a house that could just be doing something like a stamping, as an example, you know. So the expectation of the government of every single segment is very different, and the way we are, we think government should be doing something for us. Uh, but to be very fair, I think the government continues to do what it ought to be doing. Nobody can complain that there is no dialogue. The industry is always heard by the government. I would say today the Commerce Minister is probably the single biggest advocate for the automotive industry and the auto component industry when it comes to localization. Nobody has been more vocal than him. And of course, we enjoy a great patronage of our own ministry, which is the Ministry of Heavy Industries. So there is nothing to complain about. But again, when you look at the size of the country, the size of the industry, it's sort of a glass half full. It's up to you as to what you make it out to be. I would put it this way, because the resources are common for everybody. The environment is what it is, right? And there are shining examples of companies that have done really very well within those conditions. And I guess there is no reason why one cannot draw a lesson out of some of these exceptional companies. And there's just not one or two, there are so many of them, you know. Look at the number of tier one companies in the auto component space that are doing well. But also, it is a fact
Right.
that the tier ones ought to handhold the tier twos well. You know, I would say the OEMs have done a very credible job in terms of handholding the tier ones and bring them to scale, whether it is in terms of volumes, whether it is terms of quality, productivity. You know, the tier ones today are completely world class in India. I would like to believe so, but the tier ones also need to handhold the tier twos and help them in a similar manner, because today they are the weakest link in the value chain. And I guess it is the responsibility of the tier ones to do so.
Fantastic. Very valuable point there. Uh, what can we expect from ACMA at the Bharat Mobility Show? I know you gave us a glimpse there, but give me some more dope on that, please.
Well, we always rock. Yeah, so I think the show has gone really very big today, you know. And if you recall the show in 23, again, that was a show after the pandemic. And uh, that show was a wow, because 2 years, the industry had waited to showcase all the transformation that they had gone through, and there was so much more to show. And I think this show will be another wow, because um, we have more than 1,000 companies that will be displaying. They actually run out of space.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
so we've moved to a new location, which is a new state of the art international venue close to the Delhi airport. It's called Yashobhumi. And one, it's a fantastic new location. It's completely international in look and feel, and its services. So one, we ran out of space, so we have to create hangars. There are three new hangars that are coming up. Of course, again, international, all size, feel, look. And there will be a lot of focus on technology again, because, as I said, the industry would like to position itself as a technology industry. Gone are the days when you're harping on your manufacturing capabilities and achievements. I think now that's become a hygiene factor. You expect Indians or Indian companies to be at least world class when it comes to the quality of productivity. I think now the game changer will be technology that you have to offer. And of course, an international trade fair cannot be without, international pavilions. So we have huge pavilions coming up from Germany, from Taiwan, from Japan, and several other countries. We also have very many international delegations coming from as far as places like Mexico. Yeah,
Wow,
so yeah, so it's going to be very, very exciting, yes.
lots to
And then
expect.
along with the even you have very many conferences that are happening. So you will be having conferences on some of the basic things such as the raw materials and the supply chain, because uh, you know it's not necessarily the conventional raw materials. With new age industry, you require new composites, a new kind of new age raw materials, and then industry in motion transformation cannot be without talking about the transformation and EVs and stuff like that, and
Right.
sustainability and stuff like that. So I'm very excited. Just about a month away.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a very interesting conversation, and I can go on with many more questions, but unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today's episode. A big thank you, Vinny, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule for joining Autology.
Thank you, Amit. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
And thank you to all of you listeners for tuning in as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our email, autology@spglobal.com. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode. Bye for now.